I love this book, man. This shit is awesome. I wish I was like these guys, getting stoned, talking all about chicks and fighting supervillains. I love these guys. You know what? They're like Bill and Ted meet Cheech and Chong.
Yeah.
You like draw this or something?
I ink it, and I'm also the colorist. The guy next to me draws it, but we both came up with the characters. Next.
Does that mean you ink it?
Well, it means that Holden draws the pictures in pencil, and then he gives it to me to go over in ink. Next.
So basically, you just trace.
It's not tracing, all right? I add depth and shading to give the image more definition. Only then does the drawing truly take shape.
No. You go over what he draws with a pen, all right? That's tracing.
Not really.
What's up, comic book peeps? It's Detroit Madman. I'm here to do another comic haul. This one's actually a comic and a book haul. I just got back from a vacation, and I hit a bunch of half-price books in the Bay Area in California, San Francisco Bay Area, so some other stuff. Didn't dig too much through comics at the half-price books, so I only had so much time at each place, and the comics were just overwhelming. I just didn't have time to dig, so I stuck with the books, and boy, was I happy at what I got. I also got some stuff from some online auctions that I won over the last couple weeks and haven't showed yet. Do have some other big hauls to show, but I wanted to get these out of the way, stay as current as I could with my online stuff. Here I picked up a few issues of the old Marvel Tales and Marvel's Greatest Comics. This first one here is issue number 32 of Marvel Tales. It's got a cool cover with the Rhino and Spider-Man on it. I haven't yet really popped it open to see what stories are inside. I'm not sure if they're all reprints or if there's any actual original stories in this one yet. Next up, I picked up issue number 24 of Marvel's Greatest Comics, and this one has Invincible Man. It's called Death of a Hero. Plus the matchless might of Iron Man and the mystical moxie of Doctor Strange. So there's probably a ton of reprint stories in this, as well as issue number 26. So this one's also going to have some Captain America and Iron Man in it. And those are cheap, and I like checking those out. So next up, picked up Fantasy Masterpieces number 3. It's got a lot of Captain America stories in it, and I've had a couple of these in the past that I picked up recently. Pretty cool to thumb through those old stories. I've been picking up some Captain Marvels lately, and I was happy to get this one. This is issue number 13. Pretty decent shape. Got it for a good price. And then I also got issue number 14, and I love this cover with Iron Man on it. While the Galaxy Beckons. So that one was cool. Stoked about that. And then next up, I was completely elated with the next 3 auctions that I won. So this one I got Tales to Astonish, issue number 40, featuring the Ant-Man. The Day the Ant-Man Failed. And I was following this auction, and I saw that the bidding died out on it right at the end there, so I threw one last bid in and I won it, so I was happy about that. I love this cover. And next up, picked up Teen Titans number 2, and I got this for a really good price. It does have a color breaking scratch that goes from the T to the face down there. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but other than that, it's pretty cool. The pages inside are kind of browning, and it has a little bit of staining right here. But hey, it's a Teen Titans 2, and I was super stoked with the price I got, and it was basically free shipping because I also won this. and that's Tales of Suspense, featuring Iron Man number 54. And I love this cover with the Mandarin. This is a really cool book. It's in decent shape. I'm not going to grade it or anything. I would say it's mid-grade. But, man, is that a cool book. So that was stuff that I got online the last couple of weeks. I was happy with that. So now I'll show you my half-price books. Plunder. First up, I picked this book up. I've had this before about 8 years ago. I picked this up and I read it, or I started to read it, and kind of got a little disenchanted with it. It's called The 10-Cent Plague, and it's about, the seduction of the innocent time and the Senate subcommittee hearings on comic book adolescent, all that crap back in the 50s or whatever. And it's a pretty dry read. I mean, this book, I remember reading this, is a pretty dry read, but it does have some interesting stuff in it. And I just wasn't too keen on the whole stuff that went down with Dr. Frederick Wortham at the time. But my interest has peaked, obviously, recently with my look at all that burning of the comics there. God, what was in those boxes? But my interest has been peaked again, obviously, since I started collecting again. And there is obviously one of the most famous covers that was brought up from the during the hearings, and the comic code authority was put in to place, and I think it just ruined Gaines after that. He was kind of the spokesperson there, and I remember seeing video of him just kind of not representing the medium too well, or so they said. But I was happy to pick this up. It's a $16 book, and I got it for $5.99, so I was happy about that. I'll check it out again. And then next up, this was kind of interesting. This is called the Marvel Legacy 60s to 90s Handbook. And this is going to be more like your Marvel Universe. It's going to have lots of characters in it, when their first appearance is. What I liked about this was it was broken into eras. You had the 60s, and it's in the 60s style. I think it does pretty good. And then, so each era is different. Then you got the 70s and the characters that were introduced in the 70s, which I thought this was interesting. The Fantastic Four actually had a picture of when Luke Cage was in the Fantastic Four. So that was pretty cool. There's a lot of information in this book. I used to love those Marvel Universe books, and while this isn't obviously as in-depth as that, it's pretty cool. This is the 80s, and then they have the 90s somewhere in here. So I thought that was kind of cool. Paid $9 for that, or $9.99 for that one. Next up, so last week I showed you a comic or a propaganda book I picked up, and this is a different take on that. This is actually a book on propaganda, but this book here takes it from the perspective of comic books being used as propaganda. So it covers a wide variety of subjects, from racism to politics to smoking. I mean, you name it. Whatever comic books were used for as different types of propaganda, or especially in the early 20th century, there was a lot of comic books that promoted racism and religious views and all different kinds of there's communism, anti-communism, pro-communism, you name it. Comic books have been used for all different kinds of propaganda over the years, and this book does an awesome job of really laying it out subject by subject and giving you an idea. You can see it's really in depth. Us versus them. What was it good for? Dirty Rotten. Social seduction. Religious. Political. Sexual slander. You name it, this book covers it. And the best part of it is I actually got this for $3.99, and I believe it was a $29 or $39 cover price. So I was stoked about that. Next up, what an interesting book to find. It's called Stan Lee, How to Write Comics. And when I was a kid, I picked up a book called Stan Lee, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and I still have that book. But this, I actually was very surprised at. It's a $45 cover price. I got it for $14.99. It's literally brand new. And one thing about this book that I found interesting, and I looked through this extensively last night, was he goes over all the different parts of writing comics, right? Origins, tools, basic genres, scripting, creating characters, storytelling, format, subplots, continuity, professionalism, and whatever. But from Stan Lee's perspective, he actually references a lot of material that is not Marvel. So having Stan Lee talking about non-Marvel properties is absolutely amazing to me. And he covers everything in here, from independent comics to, there's the Green Hornet, favorite artists, collaborating with artists to further the stories. I mean, he's got Vampirella in here. He's got Superman, Batman, you name it. He really covers a wide range of subject matter in here. And I really like the format. It's a nice, big, oversized book. It's got really great gloss and heavy stock to the pages. It's probably 110 or 120 pound page. And it doesn't leave anything out. I mean, he really references a ton of different material in here that I thought was awesome. Obviously, there's the Marvel greats in there. But you also find tons of different character building on from other franchises as well. There's more of Vampirella. Showcase, obviously. Start of the Silver Age. Tons of great artwork, tons of great storyboarding and panels in here. Outlines on how to build characters and do stories. I mean, it's a really good book. I was happy to find this one. I mean, really, look at the stuff that he's referencing in here. It's all-time great stuff, huh? Eisner and Millie the Model. Preacher. Talking about the writing process, and Frank Miller. His processes. And there's contributions from a lot of other authors in here that there's snippets from, there'd be snippets from Kubert or Eisner, or all different kinds of artists in here and writers. So I like that. That's a great book. Highly suggest getting that if you can find it for a deal like I got it for. All right, next up, I picked up 1,000 comic books you must read. Now, there's two versions of this book, and the other version of this book, actually, I don't like. It's a smaller book that has 1,000 pages or so in it, and it references one book per page, approximately. This one is actually written by Tony Isabella, who was a comic writer, I do believe, in some of his books I don't really like that he wrote. But when I looked through this, the 1,000 comics or so that he references in here, and little synopsis of each comic, are comics that, I would really like to read, and some I have read. And I mean, it doesn't go into really obscure stuff. If you're a guy that loves the superhero genre, you're going to find about 75% of this book is going to be up your alley, so to speak. You're going to find a lot of comics in here, and these aren't necessarily all the origin stories or all the hot titles, but he references a lot of books that have other plots that are good in it, stories he liked, and it covers all the way up into the mid to late 2000s. I really didn't like many of the books that I saw from the 2000s. I just have no familiarity with them. But all the stuff from the 50s, 60s, and 70s in here, I definitely liked reading some of the synopsises. And the cover art in here is awesome. Obviously, he's picked a lot of great representations for covers, too. So I was stoked with that book. $14.99. I think that's about a $40 cover price on that book. So what a deal. Next up, I picked up Posters in History. And I won't spend too much time on this, but this is a history book about... It does have some propaganda posters in it, but it's also advertising posters, movie posters. I'm in advertising, so this stuff really interests me. And, you know, before TV and radio and movies and all that, advertising posters were really the way that things were sold and how you caught someone's attention. So I was happy about that. I actually got that book, I think that was $3, and it's about a $30 or $40 book. Next up, I was really happy to find this book. This book is a book about Jerry Robinson. I paid $9.99 for it. It's a $35 list price, and it's a really big, thick, oversized book, and they actually had a bunch of copies of them wrapped and brand new. So they must have got a huge shipment of these from somewhere. But the first 100 pages of this book are awesome. I mean, it covers really his creation of the Joker and his run on Batman, working with, created the logo, working with Finger and Bob Kane in the early years of Batman. And the pictures in here are amazing. The covers and the artwork and the original stuff that he drew, and awesome book to look through. Like I said, the first 100 pages of this book and the stories to do with the creation of all these characters and how they did this was really awesome. And it goes on to chronicle other silver or golden age characters that he created and the creative process through that. So that was awesome. Happy to get that book. Next up, this one I was stoked to find. I've seen this book in softcover, but to find it in hardcover for a fraction of the price. It's 5 Fabulous Decades of Marvel, and this is an oversized book. And again, this is going to have tons of large, great pages, and there's whole stories in here. There's everything from covers to splash pages to character studies, character layouts, storylines, and stories about the artists and the writers. There's some good stuff in the bullpen and the backstories behind creating the great characters and stories and stuff that we love to collect today, even still today, for stuff that was created 40, 50, 60 years ago. So I like this book. Has a lot. Again, I love these oversized books. Has a lot of great artwork in it. What a great cover that is, huh? This old timely stuff is amazing. I've got a printout of that right there. The Red Skull and Captain America. So I was happy about that one. Cheap and just awesome. Next up, I picked up an advertising book. It's a reflection book. It goes back and chronicles 100 years of advertising, which is impossible to do in a book, but I like the fact they just said, screw it. We're going to use a bunch of big pictures and posters and advertisements, and which is what I like. I love this stuff. I love looking through it. So I was happy to get that one. Only $7.99. It's like a $40, $35, $45 book. Next up, I got a Taschen book on Lempicka, who was an artist in the 20s. And when everybody was doing, stick figure Art Deco art, she was making just unbelievably beautiful, full-figured, full-bodied, colorful women. and man, so I'm a big fan of hers. Some of her stuff that she's done is even iconic to this very day. So I was stoked about that. Her use of shadow and art, I always thought was super amazing. It almost has that, old time masters look to it, but it's so modern, and the use of light and color was just awesome with her work. So I was happy to get that, and I got it for $4.99. Nice big oversized art book. All right, so I got a couple left. This one I was stoked about. Look at the price on this. $4.99. The Great American Comic Books by Ron Goulart. Again, this is one of those books that is just amazing. Tons of reference material. Talks about so many different artists, and the one thing I really loved about this book as I thumbed through it was it wasn't the same old 50 or 60 comic books that you always see in these comic book books. He really sought out some new reference material, new stuff that is off the beaten path a little bit in terms of what the most famous comics of all time would be, and he followed a different path when making this book from a lot of the other comic history books, and focused on a lot of characters, and some of the other stuff in here is just amazing. So I was happy about that. There's going to be hours and hours of awesome reading. As you can see, Bullet Man, the Spectre, stuff from Adventure Comics, but it's not the same old ones that you always see in these books. It's pretty cool ones. So I definitely look forward to spending a lot of time with this book in the future. Some old pulp stuff. All right, next up I got 75 Years of DC, and this was a really cool book. I was happy to find this one. Huge book. I got this for 20 bucks. And what this does is nothing else but go year by year through the 75 years of DC. It actually came with some big prints, and all the prints are in there as well. But it starts with the first year of DC, 1935, the genesis of it, and then where it went from there. Just amazing art. It takes about 3 or 4 pages to get through each year, and then every 8 years or so there's huge pullouts or huge splash pages, and it tells you what the 12 or 13, sometimes 8 or 10 most important books of each year was, and it goes all the way up into the 90s. So you have, or into the late 2000s actually. So you have just an amazing amount of information here, and it's really cool perspective for them to pull out, so many cool comic books from each year, and explain where DC was headed each year and what was making them tick. And I mean, look at these 2-page spreads. They're so awesome. So yeah, I was stoked about that. That's an almost brand new book too. And then last but not least, this was an interesting one I found. This is a really tall, oversized book. You can see it's even much bigger than the big books. And it's a comic book history from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, as told by Harvey Kurtzman. So the interesting world of Harvey Kurtzman and what made him tick in comics is all portrayed in here, and the stuff that he pulled out as his influences and the highlights that he feels in the comic book world over 50 years or so is pretty amazing. And the format is so that it's the size of 4 pages. So you have this book which is just filled with so much of the stuff he's basically curated here to show you what makes up the world of comics for him. And it touches on everything from independent comics. Obviously there's a lot to do with Mad Magazine in here, and they're super duper, man. So awesome book. Well, I hope you liked the haul, guys. What do you think? That brew pretty good? How about that half price books, huh? Amazing. All right, guys. Peace out, man.